Two, three.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of TU's Out Talks. I'm here with the incomparable Khalid Mirza, founding chairperson of the Securities Exchange Commission of Pakistan and founding chairperson of the Competition Commission of Pakistan, among many, many other accolades. He's going to be speaking to us about from speech impediment to setting regulatory precedent. Khalid Saab, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tara, for inviting me here to the Barak Center. And I hope that during the course of this interview, I may have something worthwhile to tell you. But let's see how it goes.
Well, sir, it's always worthwhile talking to you. Can you please share with us a little bit about your childhood?
Well, there's nothing particular to say about my childhood. The only thing is the memory that is stuck in my mind is the fact that I had a speech impediment, that I used to stammer and stutter and found it very difficult to talk to people, which is something that one took in hand and one tried to deal with it. My father was also very concerned about it. And I had a certain ambition. I wanted to become a lawyer at that time when I was young, because my father was the registrar of the Supreme Court, and I used to see all these black coats floating in and out, and I rather fancied them. Most young boys of my age look to military, joining the army, and they look to uniforms with great envy. But here I was looking at black coats. But the problem was that I stammered, and that was not good enough for me to actually become a lawyer and to be able to stand on my feet and argue in court. So I had to then deal with this issue, which has taken me most of my life. Not that it has been a problem for me, because I was able to deal with it, but it is something that has been a factor in whatever I have done. And for example, I'm talking to you now. I have to choose my words very carefully. I may have a better vocabulary than what I'm exhibiting, because as I go along, I select those words on which I'm unlikely to stammer. And I can tell you now that I'm talking to you, and I say this in class because at the moment I'm a teacher. I teach in LUMS, Lahore University of Management Sciences, that occasionally I have to tell my students that please don't worry if I get stuck on a word. I am not getting a heart attack. It can happen very badly, and so don't worry about it. Heart attacks are in any case meant for youngsters at the age of 50 and 60, around that age, whereas I'm in my mid-70s. So if I get afflicted by something, it would be other than a heart attack and not likely to be related to my speech. Now, this is what I had to say for starters, but I may wish to add something to it. The conquest of stammering, if I can use that expression, has been a major struggle. I mean, I remember there was a German doctor, I think his name was Dr. Deek, if I remember correctly, in Scotch Corner in Lahore. And I was taken to him for my stammering problem, for my speech impediment. And he said something very interesting. He said, well, you know, you have your nerves at the back of your at the neck that go, this side's nerves go that side, and this side nerves go the other side. In my case, they seem to have got twisted. So it is from here to here and from there to there. And he was of the view that I would be unlikely to stammer on a stage, or when say acting, or say giving speeches, but there would be personal occasions, one-on-one occasions, in which I would stammer quite a lot. Like he said with a big laugh, I recall that when you make love, you will stammer, which was, I didn't quite understand at that young age what he was saying, but when I recall the words, I do seem to think that he had something to say, something that I should actually have taken note of. And I remember there was a Dr. Felboos in I think it was Varis Road in Lahore, who used to hypnotize people and cure them of such like impediments. And he did try to hypnotize me, mesmerize me into speaking slowly and confidently. But the fact is that you have a questioning mind. I never really got hypnotized. He did his best, but he couldn't. But I do believe that what he did help me. And because somewhere at the back of my mind, what he was trying to suggest that I should speak slowly, deliberately, and not let my thoughts run away, with my words. I think the more synchronization of words with thoughts, I think it did help. But be that as it may, I went on and I started speaking in debates when I was in college and in elocutions, and I got the Ruchi Ramsani declamation contest at the Punjab University, which is the one that decides the best speaker amongst students. I won that twice. It was the 69th meet of the, I believe, and it was the 70th meet of the Ruchi Ramsani contest way back when I was in college. So and that contest is still held every year, and there's another contest called the Krishan Grover contest, but this is the penultimate one, and I did won that twice, and I often wonder why I did it, but I learned much later, which is when I was in England. I was told that in the Royal Dramatics Academy, I think it's called, it's for Shakespearean plays, they train actors for Shakespearean plays, that they first teach you to stammer before they turn you onto the stage, because they think the elocution becomes better. And you must recall also, it gave me a lot of encouragement as I learned, that Sophocles, the greatest orator amongst the Greeks, was a stammerer. And he used to speak with a pebble in his mouth to the waves. I've done that myself, with a pebble in my mouth, speaking. Unfortunately, on one occasion, the pebble went in, so that had to be removed through various means that I don't wish to describe. But nonetheless, I mean, it is. I have. It's been a factor in my life, shall I say? So I believe, adequately dealt with it. I wouldn't say in a very superb fashion, but to some extent, yes. I've been able to deal with the impediment, if not fully overcome it. At least it's something that has become manageable.
Well, as we have spoken about, not only was Sophocles one of the greatest orators, but President of the United States, Joe Biden, is a stammerer. Remember when I sent you that article about that? And so there's many people who have speech impediments who've gone on to be great orators, including your award-winning self. What tips do you have for the people watching, whether it's a speech impediment or other obstacles they face, how they can go about thinking to overcome them, sir?
I really feel not qualified to answer that question, but let me make an attempt, okay? And that is actually, if you like, the sum total of my life. You see, whatever I have done, it has been a bit of a struggle. See, I would like to say, whatever, it's not only this business of trying to get over my impediment, but whatever it is, has been 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. So I don't claim to have any particular insights or any particular strengths, but it's just dogged hard work and determination. And I'm not very highly educated. I mean, I teach in LUMS, but I'm not qualified to teach. I mean, I don't have a PhD. Most of my colleagues are PhDs and have written all kinds of papers and books and so on and so forth. It's not something which I've done. But what I do have is considerable experience And whatever I know does not come from books. It actually comes purely from the fact that I have it's my experience. I mean, it's what I picked up. It's what I have gathered. A little bit of sunshine which I've gathered is all what I have. Now, right now, I mean, I can tell you at this age that I'm talking to you, which is now towards the sunset of my life, it's 55 years is what I have worked, and that has been without a break. If I leave a job, say in the evening one day, or I travel overnight and take over the next job the next day. When I came here to Pakistan to chair the Securities and Exchange Commission, I was that time IFC's Chief of Mission in Bangkok. I took a flight from Bangkok to Malaysia in the evening after handing over charge, and another flight from Malaysia, from Hong Kong, what's called Kuala Lumpur, to Islamabad. And I was in the morning, I'd taken over charge at 11 o'clock in the forenoon. So it's been without a break which I have gone from one job to another. I'm not a businessman, I'm not a risk taker, but yes, I have struggled with things. Yes, I've taken some risks, but all in the context of what were my efforts, what I was trying to do. And it sounds as though I was trying to do something great. No, I was just trying to hold down a job and to do something adequate. And to some extent, at least, I did succeed. And so it's been like a turtles, you know. You slowly go from one post to another, and whereas Hercules might probably rush through, or the hare might run past you, but you're going along as, you know, slowly, steadily, and you ultimately reach your destination, although many people may have gone past you a long time ago. So that's been basically the story of my advice, which you asked. Not that I'm qualified to give advice, but I would say keep your focus and concentrate on that. Continue to make efforts, and God will help you, inshallah. I mean, you know, I'm a Punjabi, so there is I think it's Bulle Shah is the poet, and one of his verses was this regarding a Mali, you know, the Mali that takes water in the skins of buffaloes and then waters the garden. And you know, that's called mashq in Urdu, but in Punjabi it is maj. So it says that Mali da kam maj par dave, Mola da kam phal phul deve, no, phal phul lave, deve ya na deve. So Mali da kam pani lave maj par dave, Mola da kam phal phul lave, deve ya na deve. So it comes from the Almighty. The success that has to come is from the Almighty. It is not from your own. If you want to be successful, you may try as hard as you can and still not be successful, because that is a blessing that comes from the Almighty. But you have to make your effort, and you have to do whatever is necessary. Now, I can tell you a little bit about. I can give various cuts of my life, but there's one that I'd like particularly to, or actually two which I'd like to particularly mention. As I believe I indicated that the sum total of my formal education is a master's degree in commerce from the University of the Punjab, specifically Haley College of Commerce. That's it. Now, at that time when I did my MCom, all my class fellows wanted to become chartered accountants. And the position was that in Pakistan, if you became an article clerk in a firm of chartered accountants, the question of you becoming a chartered accountant was remote because of the small number of people they actually passed every year. In England, the percentage was much higher, but my father couldn't afford to send me to England. My parents couldn't do that. So I remained in Pakistan, and I decided to make a career in the business world as a business executive. So I joined what is called the Fancy Group of Companies. And there I observed that in the Fancy Group, it's the chartered accountants which were valued. People like me had to, get whatever was left over after the chartered accountants had grabbed the prize jobs. Okay. Then from there, I wanted to make a career in finance. I joined the Investment Corporation of Pakistan. It's the same story. Chartered accountants were the ones which were valued. Chartered accountants were the ones that got whatever was available. So they got the plums, not people like me who weren't chartered accountants. Now from there, I decided to go abroad. In those days, everybody was going abroad for doing jobs and carving out careers. Well, yours truly also did the same. And I went to England and I got a job in an investment bank or a merchant bank in London. And I worked there for about 6 or 7 years, and the same story. It was the chartered accountants that got everything. Then you had to, it was what they left behind is what was left for you. Then I decided to look for a career across the Atlantic in the World Bank and the IMF, and I got a job in the World Bank, and actually in IFC, International Finance Corporation, and the situation was precisely the same. It was these blessed chartered accountants that were getting everything, and you had to pick what you could get. Now, despite all that, because of the dogged way in which one went on, over a period of time, it so happened that I rose to become what is called a division chief, and I had several chartered accountants working for me. Then over a little more period of time, I became a mission chief, and I started leading missions, appraisal missions, okay, and I had several senior chartered accountants working for me. Then I was IFC chief of mission in Bangkok, and later on, subsequently, a few years later, I was IFC chief of mission first in Istanbul and then in Bangkok. And then I had a number of chartered accountants that were reporting to me, and I was supervising their work. Then the government of Pakistan happened to invite me to come and become the securities chief, head of the Securities Exchange Commission. The first day I arrived there, okay, at 11 o'clock in the morning, which I mentioned earlier, arrived there. I saw lots of files on my desk, which I had to deal with, but there was also an invitation card. That invitation card was from the Institute of Chartered Accountants, inviting me to distribute some prizes to successful chartered accountants. So I asked the secretary to the commission, what is this? What am I to do with this? He says, well, don't you know, sir, in your new capacity, you're also the regulator of the chartered accountants profession on behalf of the Ministry of Finance. Okay? Now all this I said to a Haley College Old Boys Association meeting in which they had asked me and several others like me the question, what have you done since you left Haley College? And what were your unfulfilled wishes? So I was answering that question. And then I said to them, everybody present, that right now I've been 2 years Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, and I can tell you there have been occasions when I could have made or marred the career of a chartered accountant. Yet if you ask me now, what is my unfulfilled wish? I'd rather be a chartered accountant. Okay. So
Do you
that,
mean that? Would you actually rather be a chartered accountant than all that you've achieved?
Yes, because of how one starts one's life and what one looks to what you want to be. It's like asking a child, Okay, when he sees a pilot, he may become whatever he becomes. But then, deep down, the child in him is still there, wants to achieve that. It's like, you have in Bangkok, there was a rice trader, okay, and he became he promoted and set up Thai petrochemical industries, one of the largest conglomerates in the Far East. IFC itself had lent $500 million to do that, $500 million to do that. So you can imagine the size. And IFC doesn't lend more than 15-20% of the total lending package. So now this fellow would go to his office, and in the afternoon, at about 3 or 4 o'clock, he'd go to the rice market and do the rice trading. Okay? Okay, because that is what he had, had aimed to do in life and had achieved that, and he couldn't get that out of his system. So that is the situation with me.
Really, I think you're being very, very charming right now. You're glamorizing. Of course, we all admire and work with chartered accountants, but you have achieved plenty. And I've always been fond of the stories you've shared with me, sir, about your job interviews. Can you share a little bit about that interview for IFC?
Let me first give you another cut of my life. This was the first cut. The second cut was that when I did my MCOM, and I had to get a job, okay, and through safarish or recommendation, I got a job, as I told you earlier, with a fancy group of companies as a covenanted assistant. So I was one of a junior kind of executive, a very junior executive. And I spent 2 years with them. Okay. And by the way, the fancy group of companies at that time, if you look, the top business groups in Pakistan were the Adamjis, the Dowds, in Lahore, the Sehgals, and there were a few others. The second rung were the Valikas, the Habibs, the Fancies. I didn't join the first group, which is the top group, but I went into the second group, the number 2 group, which was the fancy group of companies, one of them. Then from there, after spending 6-7 years with them, I decided to, 3 years with them, I decided to get into finance. Okay, this is the second cut of my life. And the question was, where do I go? Which financial institution I should join? PICIC was the top institution in Pakistan in those days. Well, I didn't go there. I went to the number 2, which is the Investment Corporation of Pakistan. And then I spent 6-7 years over there, and then I went to England, as I told you earlier, to join a merchant bank over there. Now the top merchant banks like Clanwort, Penson, Warburgs, Lazards, one at the top, no, not one of, or even Robert Fleming, not one of those. I joined the number 2 level, which is the Credit and Finance Corporation, okay. So it was, and from there, I went across the Atlantic, as I told you earlier, to join the international institute, one of the international institutions. The top institution is the IMF, and our present governor comes from the IMF. Okay, I didn't get there. I got there at the second level, which is the World Bank Group. Within the World Bank Group, the top institution is the IBRD, and within IBR, and the second one, the second rung, is the IFC. So I joined the number 2, which is IFC. Within IFC, the main department in IFC, central department in those days, was the investment department. But I joined the number 2, the capital markets department. And then, when I was posted as IFC's chief of mission in Istanbul and Bangkok, the top country manager positions of chief's mission were others. But be that as it may, I came to the number 2 level. And then from there, the government of Pakistan invited me to become a regulator. To be precise, it was Shaukat Aziz. And when I didn't know him, but now the top regulatory institution, as we all know, is the State Bank of Pakistan in the financial sector. but I joined the number 2, which is the Security and Exchange Commission. Okay, and that has been the story of my life. Going up always by being number 2, never at the top, always the number 2. And the fact is that even when I got married to the second daughter, not the first daughter. So I mean, so this is what
That was not your requirement.
And when LUMS became a teacher in LUMS, I told one of the, I think it was the dean over there, I told him, I said, I suspect you are not the number 1 because my record is I join always the number 2. Okay, so.
I'm sure he was delighted to hear that.
Right.
Famous for your charm.
What was the question you asked, which I...
About your job interviews. You always tell me these great stories.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I have all kinds of experiences in job interviews, but the one I'm going to tell you is the one that happened in London, actually. There are 2 interviews in London. This is when I had applied to join IFC, the Capital Markets Department. There were 600 or 700 applicants. I was told by them, and they mentioned it to me, so I had no hope. But nonetheless, 6-7 months passed by after I applied. Nothing happened. Then I got a call one day from somebody in Washington, and she said, well, are you still interested, sir? I said, well, if you're still interested to consider me, yes. He said, well, we are one of our people who's going to pass through London, and would you be able to see him? I said, yes, if you tell me. So this was in the World Bank office, World Bank Group office in the Haymarket, near Trafalgar Square in London. And I went to saw this gentleman. He was a chap called Van Achterman, Antoine Van Achterman, a Dutchman man. He was actually, he's very famous. He's known for having coined the word emerging markets, the expression emerging markets. I'm talking about, he's written several books on emerging markets. So I was interviewed by him. So I started talking about my experience in the capital market, both in the developing world, basically Pakistan, and in the developed world, which was England, and comparing and contrasting them a little bit. When I was speaking to him, he said, well, do you mind if I take notes? I was rather stunned, this question asking me, I'm an interviewee, but he said, no, I want to take notes. I said, please go ahead. So he was taking copious notes, like pages and pages of notes. And the interview, which should have lasted like max half an hour, it went on for like 1.5 hours. And at the end of that, he said to me, I've taken lots of notes of what you said. It's quite interesting what you said. Do you mind if I use it, parts of this, in a book which I write? Of course, acknowledge what you said, but I want to use it in a book. I said, please go ahead. So that was it. So then after a few days, I got another call from Washington. They said, well, we have another gentleman, incidentally also Dutch. This poor chap has passed away. His name is Rudy Vanderbilt. He'll come and he'll interview you also. I said, fine. So I went to the Grosvenor Hotel, and Rudy interviewed me in the bar of the Grosvenor Hotel. Okay? So while he swigged his whiskey and soda, I was actually having my cup of coffee because I didn't then and didn't now and don't now drink. So he said to me after we had talked a little, he said, you have 3 disqualifications why you can't join IFC. Okay? And my heart sank, of course, when he said that. Because he said, number 1, he said, you're a Pakistani, and we have too many of people from India and Pakistan. Okay? Number 2, you don't have a degree from a recognized international university. And therefore, it's not possible for us to consider somebody with qualifications that low, or something like that, he said, which was pretty
Low.
terrible. And thirdly, he said, this merchant bank in which you're working is a subsidiary of the Bank of America. But the second party which is, you know, the second sponsor is is BCCI, and we don't like BCCI. And I said, well, you know, after all, the Bank of America is the main sponsor. He said, well, be that as it may, the fact of the matter is we don't like any association with BCCI. This is long before BCCI was ever, you know, in question or controversial, okay? But somehow they didn't like BCCI. So I said, well, I asked him, I said, is there any strength which I have? I mean, you just destroyed whatever hopes I had. He said, you have a strength. I said, what is that? He said, well, you know, you have experience of the capital markets of both a developing country and the developed world. And that's interesting for us because, you know, we are in the development game. We try to get countries to develop, their capital markets to develop. That's our main function, okay, through transactions, of course. And you would therefore, you have something to contribute. That was it. That was my interview. So I came back, I said, this is not going to happen. Nonetheless, I was called by Washington. They sent me a ticket, they sent me all sorts of things, including some money, and they said, well, come in. And they interviewed, they booked me in a hotel there in Washington, and I had to go through over 2 days about 12 or 13 interviews. And at the end of it, of the day, willy-nilly, you know, with a great deal of compunction, they did offer me a position. Throughout those interviews, I was reminded of the fact that I was not fit, but they were considering me because they thought there might be some potential.
Are you saying, sir, they reminded you? They kept saying? Like the way your second interviewer said to you, you have 3 disqualifiers. You mean throughout 2 days of interviews?
I got something like that. I got various things, you know. For example, I got one thing like that. You know, we've seen you take foreign names and you don't pronounce them properly. The question in our mind is, would he fit in an international organization? It's stuff like, it's something quite petty occasionally.
But what year was this?
Huh?
No one would dare do that now. What year was this?
Well, I'm talking now, I joined in 1982. Okay, and there was stuff like, you know, all sorts of things. I don't even want to go into those gory details, but the fact
Please go into these gory details. These are the stories we want to immortalize. I'm shocked this took place.
Well, I mean, and you know, the fact that we are not sure whether you will be able to fit in here in Washington the way we operate and work, and that, you know, I said I worked so many years in London. Don't you think I should be able to fit? Oh no, well, the English have their own ways, and we are quite different. Our whole approach is quite different. You know, so it without explaining much, but the fact of the matter is that I was being constantly, as it were, put down. Okay.
You were constantly put down, and you replied to that. But like, just saying, people are listening, and they're being put down in their life. What did you do? Did you
well,
just?
You know, this is not a characteristic of mine to contest what people say about me. If they have an opinion about me, somehow I'm not one of those that challenges that. Okay, and I can put a counter question, but I don't challenge it. I mean, it's.
Isn't a counter question a challenge, sir?
Yeah, but I have a counter question in the sense that one asks, well, okay, is there anything else that you want to say which could perhaps ameliorate what you've just said? I'm just trying to remember that David Gill, the head of the Capital Markets Department over there, you know, what he said, but it was something like, would you be able to do a project in Bangladesh? And I said, I wish I think I could. There are areas in Bangladesh in the financial sector which need to be looked at, and I would. He said, do you know, not a single of my officers wants to work on Bangladesh. I said, well, if I join IFC, then I would request you to please put me to work in Bangladesh. So he said, really? He said, yes, and I think I'll be able to do a deal that you would be proud of. So he said, and then he did. When I joined IFC, he said, okay, go to Bangladesh and see what you can do. Well, I set up in Bangladesh the first leasing company in Bangladesh, the Industrial Development Leasing Corporation of Bangladesh, in partnership with the Korean leasing company, which was a subsidiary of Oryx Leasing in Korea. So it was like a subsidiary of Oryx, a very successful financial institution in Bangladesh. Okay, and but that was God's kindness. Very, very frankly, things seemed to just pan out in a way that things worked out.
Wait a sec. You said 90% perspiration. You must have worked like a dog to
Yes,
get that
of
to
course,
happen.
one does work, but it's not always that you are rewarded with success. But sometimes you are, and sometimes you are not. And I have my share of don't like to think about them, but I have had my share of, shall we say, non-successes.
Okay, so can we ask you not to bring up any personal non-success, but how you dealt with it? Maybe you can share how you overcame, without giving any details you don't wish to, about any personal less than perfect situation. Any tips from someone?
Well, I mean, I don't know what tips I could give. I mentioned to you earlier, which is that you have to be. I don't want to. I know this will be perhaps not strike anyone and these modern people, but I think, and I'm not an elitist at all. I don't come from an elite group. I mean, my family is a middle class family, or maybe you might describe it as a lower middle class family, and most of them are actually, they've done jobs. It's not that they own businesses and industries and so on and so forth. So I come from a pretty ordinary background. So and I suppose compared to most other people, I remained conscious of that. And that may have helped in its odd way, because the expectations were low, not high. And so if something I got somewhere, then that was gratifying. There are lots of instances. For example, in England when I was working, sometimes the worm does turn. Okay, and I was asked by my boss, who happened to be a lady. She said, "Well, make out this letter." So I made out the letter and took it, and she made some changes. I looked at the changes, and I accepted almost all of them. She had improved. But there were a couple of English mistakes that she had done. So I pointed out to her that this is grammatically incorrect. And you may have thought of something else, but this is grammatic. She looked at me and she said, English is my language. At that time, as I told you, the worm did turn, something went wonky. I said, I'd like to tell you, madam, that I was educated in the English language, unlike people in England who just picked it up. So it was.
Was this your boss?
Yes, I did say that. Okay. And
luckily, did you stay there?
Luckily, I got away with it. But
how did you get away with that?
Well, you see,
that's horrible, sir.
Well, the problem is that if you are a workhorse, people don't want to lose you. Also, that's also.
That's true, but egos are egos. Wow.
You have things like this. I was one day, working. I used to live in a place called Rickmansworth in London, and I would travel by train. So like a 45-minute journey to Liverpool Street, and this office was on Leadenhall Street, which is near Liverpool Street. And one day, usually it would be late hours. So here at about 8 o'clock in the evening, I was about to go home when my boss arrives, this chap, and he says, "Well, I want you now to just look at this proposal and give me a back of the envelope of what you think." Okay? So I said, "Listen, my family is waiting. By the time I get home, it'll be like 9 o'clock. In any case, the children would have gone to bed by then. Okay, but I do need to go now. And no, just take a few minutes and do it.
Is that all we get?
So I said, well, listen, I mean, it's all very well for you to say that, and now that you're asking me to do it in such a nice way, I'll do it. But the fact is, if I get divorced, okay, then my problem is not, my problem is simply this, okay, is that she's a good-looking girl, she'll probably get married, okay, but the question is, who will marry me? I mean, that's the big issue which I have here right now.
And what did he say?
No,
What did he say?
it doesn't really matter. He just said, okay, come and do it tomorrow early in the morning and something like that. But it is.
I don't think that was insolent. That was more charming. But the one you sent to the lady was so insolent.
Yeah, you're not exactly my boss, but some kind of senior, a little bit. And so it's, but the thing is that from the time that I was a junior employee to the time that I rose slowly and very slowly and with a great deal of effort, okay, and God's grace, to be very honest, other things would not have happened without God's grace at all. This is all the grace of the Almighty, frankly. And I have always, I don't want to sound immodest, please. It's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm just stating a fact that I talked about things as they were and stood up for what I believed in. And my effort was to always say the truth as I saw it. And actually it goes back to my childhood, because when I was like 7 or 8 years old, then there was an incident in class. A student, while the teacher was on the blackboard, threw something at her. And she was very angry. And she wanted to know who it was. And she said, well, and I had actually not seen the student throw it, but I knew it was, okay, many people had seen the fellow throw. And I was and she said, well, tomorrow morning I'm going to ask. And if I don't get you to know, then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to cane you, blah, 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 the whole class. Okay? So I went home very upset. And my mother asked me, she said, why are you upset? And I said, well, this is what has happened. And she said something to me that I remember till today, and it has stood well for me, although I have, I've suffered because of that also, perhaps a little bit, but most of the time it has stood well by me. She said, if you stand up and say the truth, okay, then you don't know what forces will come to your aid. So just stand up for what is right and say what is the truth. The next day, when the teacher asked me, he said, well, I said, I was looking at my paper. I really didn't see him. It could have been him, it could have been anybody else. And the good thing is, I got away with it. Maybe it was my honest face, or maybe it was my stupid look, I didn't know what it was. But I did get away with it, okay? Whereas the rest of many others suffered because she thought they should have known and they weren't saying what they were saying. But I somehow got away with it.
It sounds like Harry Potter. Both when Dumbledore tells Harry that, when you stand up for me, all the aides will come and,
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I've never read Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's just amazing when he does the right thing. Dumbledore's aides come to him. And it's just wonderful.
So it's just one of those things. So I mean, I don't know what advice. I really don't feel qualified to give people's advice. Okay, or I mean, I don't know whether there's anything remarkable about what I did. There have been some strokes of luck, yes, which have come, or I would rather say the grace of the Almighty. Okay, right? So,
And I want to know about your day, because every day of your life,
Mm.
you have like a million meetings. You have so many meetings and you're back to back. Can you describe a typical day in your life? Because it's quite hectic.
well, it used to be very hectic, much more hectic than what it is now. But because, for the last 10 or 11 years, I've been a teacher. And, well, I'm very busy preparing for classes. It takes me a just to give you an example, for every class, I'm telling you, I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little embarrassed saying that, because I know that my fellow teachers in LUMS would probably find it difficult to appreciate and may even mock me about this. But it takes me 7-8 hours to prepare for a class. Because I've got to look, I've got to read, I've got to understand. मैं to say in Urdu expression, पढ़ के पढ़ाता हूँ, पढ़ के.
This is a new module, or even now that you've been teaching this? So even repeating a module, refreshing yourself.
Yes, refreshing myself, putting myself up to date, getting myself ready, putting my notes across, okay? And then, so it takes me a long time. And then, I'm on, right now on 4 corporate boards and also a member of the policy board, the Security and Exchange Commission, and the second, shall we say, rung in the security regulatory apparatus. So, I mean, I have, so there's a lot to be done. And when I'm traveling, I usually have, you're right, 7-8 meetings a day. And you usually start at breakfast and then it goes right till the evening, okay? And yes, now that I'm a little getting on a little bit, it is tiring. And the issue which I have right now is perhaps one of memory, that one does forget. And, but I get by, and you see, my strength, if I was to call my strength, if I was to call it a strength, is the experience and a little bit of sunshine that I have gathered over my life, okay, over the 55 years which I have worked, okay. And the weakness is that I don't have the requisite academic qualifications or the requisite training to be. If I had that, then I would be much more than what I am right now.
Do you really believe that? Do
Yes,
you really believe it would make a difference?
Oh yes, it would. I'll tell you. When I was in the World Bank Group and in other places also, I found that my qualified colleagues, okay, including chartered accountants, one must not forget that, okay, who would look at a piece of paper and quickly read through it, okay, and in a matter of 10 minutes they'd be able to come to a position. And if somebody asked them, let's say a senior or whoever it is, what do you think about this? They had a view. The same senior comes to me and I say, well, I'm still going through it. Okay, I'm still trying to understand what it is. So if I was in the senior's place, then I would say, well, if I need to use someone for this particular task, I'd rather take someone who has appreciated and understood it quickly than somebody who's struggling with it over a period of time. So it does have an impact.
No, but is that because it was easier for them, or is it because they were less thorough than you?
I don't know about that. I really wouldn't like to make this comment that they were less thorough. All I know is that they were able to understand and take a position that took me longer because they didn't have the requisite training, the requisite background that would have helped. But I've been a teacher for 10 or 11 years. Before that, I was working in what they call the real world. That is, I was working. And I have primarily worked in the financial sector. Okay, and I've been a trader. I've been a portfolio manager. Okay, I have been in project finance. set up financial institutions. I have strengthened financial institutions through various initiatives. I have provided technical advice to governments on how to develop their financial systems. I have helped in a variety of ways how a developing country could program the development of the financial sector. I've been a regulator, and I've also been a teacher. So it is 360 degrees that I have actually looked at the financial sector and been involved in the financial sector. But about the only thing I haven't been in the financial sector is I have been a priest. You see that is my thing I recall, for example, when I started teaching in LUMS, I was teaching the subject corporate governance.
Which you still teach?
Yeah. And there was this young girl, one of my students, and they're pretty precocious, these students in LUMS and IBA. So she stood up and she said, "We have seen your record, we've seen your profile. You have never really been a teacher."
She said that to you?
And she said, "How do you like to teach, sir? We'd like to know." This is the 4th or 5th class. So I thought on my feet. The little bit of reading which I do. I'm not tremendous amount of reading, but a little bit that I do. So I said, "Well, actually, this reminds me of Winston Churchill. That when Chamberlain came back from Munich after signing off a treaty with Hitler, and the very next day Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. When that happened, Chamberlain had to resign. The policy of appeasement had failed. So the question was, who should then lead the country? And between the Whigs and the Tories and the Labour, it was somehow the choice fell on Winston Churchill, who was a backbencher in the Conservative Party. Now, and he came from a fairly illustrious background anyway, and the British liked that sort of thing, the background. So the king was advised, and the king sent a message to Winston that I want to, at that time, Mr. Winston Churchill, I want to see you. So Winston Churchill went to Buckingham Palace. There was tea laid out in the drawing room. And the king asked, "Winston, do you know why I have called you here?" Although Winston knew, Churchill knew, but he said, "I couldn't imagine why, sir." So the king said, well, he laughed a little. He said, "Well, I want you to form a national government and lead the war effort." So Winston got up from where he was seated and he said, "Well, thank you very much. I'm going to take your leave, so I shall do what you're asking me to do, but I have got to go now." He said, "Why do you want to go in me? Why don't you finish your tea?" He said, "No, I have to get to work." And he went straight from Buckingham Palace to Downing Street. Chamberlain was already leaving. Okay. He went to work and he started making his cabinet. He got Chamberlain to become Lord President of the House of Commons. He sent Wavell to India, and he sent Montgomery to North Africa, and then all kinds of the entire war effort was the pattern, the scheme was put in place by him, including his own cabinet, the war cabinet. And he writes in his memoirs, he says, "When I went to bed that night at 3 o'clock in the morning, the thought occurred to me that this is perhaps a training. My whole life has perhaps been a training for what I'm going to do now." That's how I feel when I teach. That my whole life has been a training to teach.
That's a pretty wow answer. Sometimes I feel like all the fabrics of what I've been through in my life lead me to the moments of the next, and they're all sort of set up in this giant plan. So that's brilliant. And what did she say in response? Did
No,
she
she
say-
said, thank you very much. We understood perfectly, and you are a very good teacher, sir. Whether she meant it or not, I don't know, but
That's amazing. And I know that you are in one of your million meetings back to back while you're here in Karachi. But it's been so nice of you to stop by and say hi and surprise us today. But spending this time with you is always special.
Well, it's difficult to say no to Tara. do you remember that Barak Center opening in which the refrain of every speaker was, you can't say no to Tara? Well, somehow it's clicked with me.
You know what? Like, people keep saying that over and over again too. I'm very surprised you remember, but
Yes.
thank you for stopping by. And this was just brilliant, and learning from you
Yes.
and sharing your perspective with everyone.
I mean, you're talking about learning. I really don't know whether I've said anything that was worthwhile for anyone. They just gassed along with what I did and what I didn't. And to the best of my knowledge and belief, I've said whatever was correct. And if somebody wants to pick up something from it, well, so much the better.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you once again. Have an exceptional rest of your trip here in Karachi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right.